Welcome to the Entre Pastors podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Entre Pastors podcast on YouTube. I'm Jon Sanders, one of the co-hosts of the show. And I want to welcome you to episode number 44, where you're getting ready to hear from an amazing guest by the name of Mike Thakur. We're titling this episode, Business Plus Mission Equals Boom. You're like, man, what does that mean? I don't even understand. Well, Mike's going to tell you all about it. He recently released a book by the name of Mike Drop. He's an awesome guy. He's not a pastor. He was at one time. And he really saw a different path forward in his life than serving in a traditional pastoral role. He's been extremely successful in the business realm and marketplace. And man, he has a heart for the church. He has a heart for the kingdom. But his viewpoint's a little different than what so many of us are comfortable with in the traditional setting. And I find his take on things so refreshing. It might challenge, I recognize it might challenge some that are coming from a more traditional place, but I think Mike gets it. I think he sees what's going on in the world today, in the church today. I love how he has a strategy for his business funding God's kingdom work in the world, and how sometimes we've put too much of that on the church, honestly. So I'm not going to say more about it. I don't want to steal his thunder. I'm going to let him say it for himself. But I promise you guys are in for a treat with this episode. So without any further ado, check out this interview that Les and I did recently with Mike Thakur. Here we go. Well, Mike Thakur, we could not be more excited to have you as a guest on the Entre Pastors podcast. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, guys. Excited to be here. Looking forward to it. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Now, based on your accent, we need to just explain to people where you're from, because clearly you're not from the part of the country that Les is from. Normally we have our translator on to
You're not
translate.
from Alabama? Come on.
Yeah, I'm from Houston, Texas, about 20 years or so, but originally from the UK. So evidently still got a little bit of my way East Texas drawl.
I love it. And for those that are listening on audio and don't see what we see on the YouTube here, you've got a pretty cool chair that you're sitting in. The first time I met you, I was like, that's an awesome chair that you're sitting in. So tell our audience about your chair, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I have some workspaces. That's my kind of day job. And so we buy a lot of furniture. I saw this kind of metal studded chair with a Union Jack on the inside and figured, hey, you know what? It's my roots. I can do an English flag on there. So we had it in the spaces for years. Nobody ever used it. It moved around, being staged from room to room, and finally I said, you know what? I'm taking that bad boy home. I'm going to put it in my studio. It'll work just fine there.
It's kind of like a branding thing in some ways. I mean, I don't know if that's the branding you're going for, but it's kind of unique, man. It makes you stand out.
You know, I wanted to get a Texan one, but they didn't have any. And they had some just regular US flags, but I didn't really want to get two. But, you know, I've lived in America more than I lived in England as a grown-up. So, you know, it kind of just feels like home being in Texas.
Well, I suppose that might be a good place to jump in. Tell us a little bit about your life in terms of where you've been and the work that you do. Now, you're not a pastor. I'll come right out and tell everyone at the beginning, you're not a pastor per se, but you have some thoughts that very much resonate with the heartbeat of this show, and I can't wait to unpack some of that with you. But why don't you just give a little bit of an introduction of yourself and your life, and in there somewhere, tell me how you got from the UK to Texas. I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. You know, as a kid growing up, my family got saved when I was about 9, so I got dragged along to church, you know, at that point, and you know, felt like it made sense, I guess, as it got older. Thought I'd go be a preacher. Studied Bible theology for a few years, got my undergrad, did some postgrad as well. Didn't finish that, and ended up going into business. I worked for a big company out there for a few years, started my own business, and then one day we had an opportunity to move over to South Houston and be youth pastors, me and my wife. And so we thought, hey, we've got no kids, you know, we'll go give it a try. We did it for a couple of years, went back to the UK, and went back to working, you know, the regular gig, actually for the same company I'd worked for previously, and spent a few more years there with them. Ended up selling high-end IT solutions to government clients, you know, ministry of defense, that kind of stuff. So it was a pretty nice gig. My sales teams were pretty big, about 100 million or so in revenue at the time with the exchange rates and that kind of fun stuff. And we carried on in England for a few more years. And then one day thought, well, you know, maybe we'll give America another try. And we stayed in touch with the folks that we worked at at their church previously. So we came back on staff again, spent a few more years doing the ministry thing before we realized, ministry and me may not be, the best combination here. There's probably a different way to skin this cat. And so we ended up going back into regular work. I was chief operating officer at a security company. We were nicknamed the Secret Service for Billionaires. So we did kidnap, ransom, extortion, all the kind of usual stuff you read about on TV. And while I was doing that, I had this idea that I wanted to go get an office one day, long before working from home was a thing, and couldn't find anything I liked. And I found plenty that I didn't. So I said to my wife, babe, I don't think I could do a worse job than these guys. I think I should go build something. And we ended up building about 119 offices in the first location, opened in 2015, June 2015. So 7 years old this month.
Wow. Well, we're going to unpack that, but I just had to stop and want to connect the dots for our audience. It's obvious that you made kind of a natural connection there between, like youth ministry and working in a company that's doing $100 million in sales. Like I see where there's a lot of similarity in those two things. So makes sense.
I might have taken a slight pay cut. You're right.
You think? Yeah, that must have been rough going back into the business world and having to take that pay cut. So,
yeah.
So tell me more about your business. So here's what I want to know. Right on the front of your website at mikethakur.com, I believe is what I typed in. It says that business plus mission equals boom.
Yeah.
And so those are two things we love to talk about. We love to talk about, obviously, the mission for many of us that involves some kind of pastoral ministry, but we also love to talk business here. And I want to know what the boom is. So yeah, let's unpack all of that. I want to know more about your business. I want to know about the mission that you are called to and what's this boom you speak of. So tell me more about your business. Like, I'm curious, what kind of work do you do? I'm going to tell our audience about what I see you doing on TikTok here in a minute, but I'll let you go first. Tell us about your business, Mike.
Yeah. So, when we built the co-working business back in 2014, 2015, when we were getting ready to open, my wife and I obviously been in ministry, got a heart for ministry, a heart for people, and tried it a few different ways and a few different times over the years. And so the thought for us was, look, what if we can do ministry and what if we can touch lives without needing all the church fluff? Because clearly we're just not made for that. And so when we built the for-profit business Work Lodge, which is my co-working company, we actually created a 501c3 at the same time. It's called FT5K, as in Feed the 5,000. Used to be called the Gabriel Project. We just renamed it a little while ago. Getting that domain name was harder than you think. And so the goal was, look, we'll take a for-profit business, we'll fund the nonprofit, we can go do whatever we want, and I don't have to ask anybody for any money. Seems like a winner, and it seems pretty straightforward. And so that's what we've done for the last 7 years. And so I wrote a book that came out a few weeks ago called Mic Drop, and the tagline is, do business God's way. Here? All right, look at this. You guys,
we both got a copy of your book.
I like it. New best friends over here, folks. Make sure you share their podcast with somebody else because it's awesome. Anyway, the idea behind the book is, look, let's do business God's way, live like a king, change the world, right? That's what we're trying to figure out right now. And that's what we've been in this experiment of for the last few years. And there's a play on words here. Most people here live like a king and they think, oh, great, I want to go make a bunch of money. You can make a bunch of money, but it's not yours. Let me just be clear. It's someone else's, and that's what the book's about. So the idea of boom is business operating on mission. And my formula that I think is in the Bible, I think it's in the Old Testament, and I think it bleeds all the way through it, is that you can do business and you can be okay. You can be successful. You can have a good life. You can make some money. You can create some jobs. You can do mission and ministry and you can do okay. You can touch lives. You can build a big church. You can go build a big organization, whatever you want. But man, if you fuse those two things together, instead of 1 + 1 making 2, 1 + 1 makes 11. There's this exponential kind of thing that happens. And it's not that I'm hating on churches. I'm not hating on pastors or anything like that. I don't think the world would do, too badly if we had a few less churches around the place. And I think most people would probably agree with me on that. But the concept is, listen, church can only do so much. And pastors and churches were never designed to be the primary drivers of ministry. These guys are there to equip the body, to equip the saints, to encourage, to come alongside and help, almost to be like the gas station where you get refilled and refueled. But the day-to-day work, the job of delivering God's impact to the world and loving on people for Jesus, It can't happen in a church on a Sunday morning because that's only one morning out of 7. But
Yep.
in business and in entrepreneurship, we touch our customers, our partners, our vendors, our staff all day, every day, 6, 7 days a week. So that's the playing field. Like that's where the game gets played. And for me, I view our pastors and leaders as these are the coaches in the stand. But you can't have a stand full of coaches and no players. And you can't ask the coaches to come on the field and play because then there's no coaches. Like we've all got our roles. And if we're out there in the thick of it around people all day, every day, we can use our time and our abilities, but also we can use our businesses as a resource for kingdom and use the business as a vehicle for kingdom. We can achieve so much more. And I look at Paul, and for me, I pulled this thread in the book, but he's the big example. Unlike all the other apostles who said, we're so special. You go vote for some deacons. We're not waiting on tables. We need to pray and read the Bible all day, every day. And Paul's like, well, I'm going to write half the New Testament, but while I'm at it, I'm going to go make some tents. I'm going to go spend a little bit of time in prison. I'm going to get beat up and have to heal. And you go do your thing. I'm going to do mine. And let's kind of see which one works. And I know it wasn't quite as aggressive as that, but the reality is when you read the story, right? The guy that wrote most of the New Testament is the guy that literally had a regular gig and was funding his own way and funding other people to be with him in ministry instead of taking. He realized when he talked about generosity, the joy of giving isn't just giving from people who make a ton of money and can afford to. It's the joy of being a part of that giving and generous journey, no matter what we're doing, whether it's a ministry role, whether it's a non-ministry role, whether it's business, whether it's something different. So lots of answers for you. I'll stop, but that's where the B.O.O.M comes from.
Oh man, this is on fire. I love this stuff. And it just resonates with so much of where we are at in our mindset and philosophy on a lot of this. So let me back up, and we're circling back around to this, I promise. But tell me, so at Work Lodge, that's your business. You're creating co-working spaces or offices. Tell me more about that. You've been doing this since 2015. What's that business model like?
Yeah. So, obviously I thought it was a good idea. Evidently a few other people had the same idea. So, when I first thought about going open in workspace, it was probably 2013. Co-working wasn't really a thing. I mean, even the big guys, barely had a couple locations or whatever. So we just wanted to create a community where, again, taking that biblical model, one can slay 1,000, two can slay 10, right? So we can build a community around business and entrepreneurship. We can bring lots of people together. Surely they'll be more successful than if they're on their own, networking, relationships, doing business, whichever way you want to look at it. And we're a faith-based business. We don't obviously push that on anybody. There's subtle clues if somebody looks, that we come from a different heart. But for our team and our staff, they know where my DNA comes from. And we've worked really hard on this concept of doing business God's way, of having purpose and DNA that's built on biblical principles. And and I'm not talking about, the folks who say I'm a Christian and I have a business and let's just put a Jesus sticker on it, because that's not going to work. There's a lot more to it than that. It's when you get the hard questions and the hard situations, and you got to stop and ask yourself, like, I want to react this way, but the Bible says I'm supposed to react this way. So I'm going to make this decision, even though it's going to cost me over here, because it's the right thing to do. And there's a lot more depth that goes into that. And it's a whole Pandora's box to open. But yeah, we've got 2 locations, 100-ish offices in each one. So a couple hundred or so offices. And we got a range of folks from, one person kind of shops right the way through to our biggest one's a Fortune 50 company that has a suite of offices for a whole team. So we've been pretty blessed, other than 2020, which was not the greatest of year to be in workspace, but right. It's been a fun ride.
So these must be pretty good sized facilities then, if you have that many offices just in 2 locations. Like you've got a pretty good sized building where these offices are located.
Yeah, no, they are for sure. I think we're very much larger than most co-working spaces. The big guys obviously have got some bigger ones, but here in Houston, we're the oldest co-working space. We're the highest rated. We've got the most reviews of any of the other ones out there. I mean, we've got a pretty good reputation. We just got voted #1 in the Woodlands, which is North Houston. And for those that don't know, the Woodlands is literally voted the #1 city to live in America. So, we're feeling pretty proud of that this year. Yeah. And I think that's just an evidence or a result of the hard work that we put in, trying to do business a different way, trying to make decisions a different way, trying to lead a different way. And I'm not saying we get it right every time. But there's been a lot of interesting, things that have happened along the journey. And I think some of that, even from a spiritual and a supernatural perspective, is because we've tried to bring that DNA into the heart of the business.
Mike, one of the things that our listeners have in common, whether they're just starting out their venture, whatever it looks like, or if they've been doing it for a little while, but they just want to take it to a different level, one of the challenges is what are the best ways for them to get their message in front of the right people? So rewind just a bit to those early days where was it all based upon, or most of it based upon relationships that you already had and networking that you had done from your prior business? Or did you have to really have a mindset shift of the way that you were doing things to let people know what you had to offer the world? Because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck or else never get started.
Yeah. So I think, when you think about business or you think about life, for me, there's typically two roads that I look for or look at. And this isn't a hard and fast rule. This is just me kind of musing as I think through my experiences. And what I mean by this is, I grew up in the UK. In England, you're either an evangelical Christian or you're a dead Christian. There's no in betweens. There's no alternatives. The Baptist church down the road spoke in tongues. The Methodist church down the road spoke in tongues. My Pentecostal church spoke in tongues. Like it was normal. That's just how it was. I come to America, it's a little bit different over here, in case you haven't noticed. And a few of us think different things than a few others, and we all say we love Jesus, but we happily disagree on stuff all the time. And we're not going to get into theology today. But when you apply that to business and life, I think that rubber starts to hit the road. And so, I can make a decision to do something, and it's my own free will, it's my choice, and I can go do it. And God sits back, and I think he lets me do that. That's the beauty of free will. But there are also those moments in time, and we don't all have them all the time, but I think all of us get a few of these from time to time. And these moments come along where it's what I call a life-changing event. Something significant happens. So for example, I have a very good friend. His daughter passed away when she was about 7 years or 8 years old. Very rare condition. Him and his wife didn't make it, through the marriage and all that kind of stuff. Christian couple. That would be an extreme example of a life-changing event. You could pinpoint at that moment in time, everything changed. Sometimes those things happen and it's not quite so obvious, but they happen nonetheless. And so for us, we had one of those times. So we were church planting, literally trying to grow a church. And our American parents, who used to be our pastors in South Houston, still great friends, dear family to us, even though not by blood, they came to visit. And we were in church on a Sunday morning. And I tell this story in the book. And we're in church Sunday morning, and they prayed for me and Linda at the end, my wife. And as he prayed, he started to kind of get a sense that God was trying to communicate something to us. So call it prophecy, call it whatever you want, call it crazy, whatever you want to call it, I'm okay with it. But he starts to tell us that God's showing him this picture of a space. And this space is like a big building with lots of compartments and rooms in it. And, and he goes on to explain this a little bit more detail. And he says, I'm sensing it's not even maybe a mile away, maybe 2 miles away, somewhere real close. And it looks like a government building. This is what he says to us. So we're sitting there, young church planners thinking, holy moly, we've hit the jackpot. Like, we're going to build a massive church for Jesus. Everything's going to go awesome. We're going to have thousands of people in the congregation. We got like 55 there, I think, that week or something. Like, life's going to be great. Well, the church thing doesn't really work out quite the way I wanted. I end up having this idea, so I thought my idea, for a co-working space. So the second location is across the freeway from the dance studio where we used to meet, less than a mile away. It's a 4-story office building. And obviously we've got about 98 offices in that. So it's a big space with lots of compartments and rooms. Last year, Homeland Security moved into the second floor of the building. So it's now primarily occupied by a government tenant, bigger than anybody else. And so, I look at all of it. The only crazy situation we had a couple of others. And so, for me with this business particularly, and with this journey, even though I think it was, an idea that I had, I think it was a little bit more than that. And I think it was a God idea. And he was gracious enough to let me pick up on that, or I was able to sense it or hear it or whatever. And I think for some of the listeners here, you may be having a business idea, or you may be thinking about doing something, and you may not have even realized yet that this isn't a you idea. This is a God idea. And he's in this, and he's in this for a reason. For me, my justification or my explanation is through this experiment now with a nonprofit, a for-profit. Now we've got a book out explaining how we did it, why we did it, why you should think about doing it. You know, if you're a business owner, and obviously, you know, I'll be talking about it for years to come. And it starts to make more sense as you look in the rear view mirror. But when you're in the back looking out the front, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's pathway number one. And that's the ideal. And if that's you listening, you know, or if that's you, you know, sensing in your heart that this is a God thing that he's pressed on you, obviously that means he's on your team. That doesn't mean he's going to do everything for you. It's been a heck of a ride. It's been incredibly challenging, incredibly tough. I'm not going to go into all the details again, but you wouldn't believe the stories I told you if I told them to you, that the 6 or 7 years that we've had with just crazy stuff, crazy people making up all kinds of crazy things. Now you've got the second path where maybe you've got an idea, or you want to go into business, or you want to do something, and you don't really feel like it's a God thing at all. You don't even feel like it's an anything thing. You just think you want to do something. Well, that's not a reason not to do it. And it's not a reason to do it. I think my best advice would be lean into Jesus and try and figure out, where is he in this? He may be quite happy for you to go and do it. It may not matter whether it's his idea or your idea. It may just be the next thing for your life. And that's okay. You know, God gives us free will. I think he knows the choices we make, and he knows the path that he lays out in front of us. And I think he's got an ideal one, you know, but I think he's also pretty smart, and he can get us back on track if we kind of go a little bit off the rails. Oh. But I also don't think every idea is a God thing. I don't think he cares which kind of baked beans I pick off the shelf when I go to the grocery store. I think he's okay with either of them. Bushes might be a little bit better, but I think he's okay.
You're right about that.
Right.
So, you know, I think the first thing for me to answer the question is figure out which side, you know, Jesus is falling on this.
That's really
if
good,
it's a God idea, then there's a deeper purpose behind it. So you're going to have to go deeper and understand what that is, because there's more to it. And with more comes more opposition, comes more spiritual warfare. You know, Paul wasn't kidding when he said there's an armor out there. You don't need an armor if you're not going into battle. And he laid it out clearly. You need a sword, a shield, you know, a helmet. You don't need those things if everything's going to be okay. So you got to be prepared for that. And if it's just a regular idea and you want to go open an ice cream shop because you like ice cream, dude, if God's not saying no, go for it. But if there's a hesitancy and you feel like maybe God is saying no, just pause for a second. Don't run ahead of yourself. Try and figure out what that might be. It could be a great idea and just terrible timing. You know, it could be a terrible idea and great timing. I know which one I'd rather have, but look, you can't do this without him, no matter how much you think you can. Your intelligence, your skill, all of it is meaningless. Like I said, you can do business on its own, but unless you get that fusion and you figure that formula out, it's going to be so much less impactful than it could be.
Yeah. Well, I love that intersection of business and mission. I love everything that you're saying. Okay, so here's a question, and please don't hold back, Mike. Like, don't worry about hurting feelings. Like, primarily our audience is pastors. You said something a minute ago that I want to highlight, and it's provocative, probably for many pastors listening. It didn't rock my world because I think I know where you're coming from. You made a statement that, you know, maybe it's a good thing if there's quite a few less churches in our culture. I think we're heading in that direction post-COVID. I think there's many churches that are just hanging by a thread. But so hold that thought and then come back to this thing. I was going to ask you to unpack your strategy of launching a business, a for-profit business, and a nonprofit at the same time. So, and I get your I understand your strategy is to fund the nonprofit through the for-profit and then go do mission in the world and give to causes that you feel called to participate in. Here's where I'm connecting these two thoughts. Why not just be really good in business and a for-profit business and then take that money and put it into the church so the church can go do those things? Don't hold back, Mike. How do you answer that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to think about here. So first of all, that's not what the church was designed for. This isn't a case of competence. It's not a case of skill. This isn't a comment on the ability of a pastor or not. That's not the primary design of why church existed. So let's get into church, right? When we say church, we're talking about a big C church, because that's what we all talk about. We're thinking about a corporate organized church. When the Bible talks about church, the Greek word's ecclesia, it's talking about a community, a body of believers. There were no buildings in the New Testament. Like, there was no church that we would equate to today. They met in people's homes. It wasn't organized religion. It wasn't institutions, and it wasn't big business. So I just want to kind of lay that groundwork out because it's important. So, you know, can I write a big check to a pastor? Absolutely. What's he going to do with it? Like, how much can he handle? So if I write a check for $100,000, most pastors would probably figure out something is to do with it. And it would probably revolve around the facility. I'm guessing. If I write a check for $1 million or $2 million, they're definitely going to write it, go spend it on a building. Hey, we should expand. We should envelop our kind of congregation better, whatever, because that's the mindset of building that organization, that institution. And we've kind of created that monster by the way that the things we expect from them, right? Because if they don't do that, they're not winning, right?
Yeah,
if you're not growing your building, you're not getting more services on, you're failing as a pastor. No one's asking how many people are you praying with on any given week, how many people are getting saved. Like, we pretend that we care about that. We really care about how many folks are on a Sunday morning service. So I think first of all, that's not the primary design. Second of all, I think we rob ourselves of the work God's trying to do in us. And again, what I mean by that is no comment at all on the pastors and the work that God's doing through their lives. But go back to that idea of the pastor as coach, okay? Nobody expects Bill Belichick to get on the field and throw the ball for Tom Brady when he's a Patriot. Everybody expects Tom to throw the ball. When he throws the ball and gets a touchdown, Bill can celebrate because he's a part of it. But Tom's the guy doing cartwheels on the field. But if he doesn't throw the ball, he doesn't get the celebration. He doesn't get the growth and the development in himself. For us as business owners and entrepreneurs, our primary reason for existing, our primary reason for our business to exist is not to make money for us. It's to make money for Jesus. It's his business. It's his kingdom. It's all his money. And that's the end of it. This is not an argument that's up for debate. The Bible's very clear. God owns everything. He talks about it in Psalms. He talks about it in Proverbs. He talks about it in the Old and the New Testament. Like, what do I need your sacrifices for? I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. Like, are you kidding me? You want to come at me with, I did a good job because I threw a bull on an altar for you. So as an entrepreneur, if I'm going to experience God's fullness in my life, the only way I can do that is as I move through these levels of generosity, what I call elastic generosity. When I get to the top tier, it's not just about, can I write a check to someone else? Not even can I write a check to another organization or a ministry or whoever's out there doing it. It's so that I can figure out through my life, through my business, through my team, through my organization, through my structure, God has got a defined plan to use those profits and do something that's self-sustainable, that's creatable, and that can outlive me and touch more and more lives. Because if I write checks, eventually the money stops. I sell the business, or the business doesn't do so well, or whatever. If I think of the outpouring in the ministry as part of the business work, I can create another sustainable system, process, whatever you want to call it, that can continue to touch lives for Jesus long after I'm gone. That's the ideal that we're trying to get to here. And I see 4 different levels that people go through from a generous heart, starting at the bottom where we don't have a whole lot and we just give what we can, all the way through to the top where we have a lot, but we can give a lot. And actually we can give more than a lot because we can start to give the intelligence and the skill set that we've got and the competencies. And so we miss all of that if we just write a check and give it to someone else. And I'll say this just to kind of follow on. Last year, early on in the year, I felt like God was nudging me and my wife to hit a certain number of generosity. And it was a lot of zeros. It was more than we've ever done before. And, it kind of freaked me out a little bit. You think it's easy when the numbers are smaller, but you start adding digits, and dude, it gets harder no matter what. That selfish nature, it just comes up and you think, whoa, hang on a second. Like, I could buy a lake house with that. Like, I don't have a lake house. Why am I doing this? And so it's okay. We both felt it was a God thing. And so we committed to it. We talked to the board of our nonprofit and said, hey, we think God wants us to invest this much in the kingdom this year. I couldn't give it away. I literally couldn't give it away fast enough, because the second I start asking questions, and these aren't difficult questions, but if I'm going to write a check that's a meaningful amount, or I'm going to partner with you and invest in something that you're doing, I need to understand what's the return. Like, what are you going to use it for? How's it going to get disseminated out for the kingdom? And, then you start to get some answers that sometimes don't make a lot of sense. And it's like, well, why do you need a new pickup truck? Like, what's wrong with the one out front? Well, it's 4 years old. Okay, but does it still run? Like, is it causing you problems? Why are we doing that? And so what happened is, multiple times we would be talking to organizations that we knew, that we'd partnered with in the past, people that we might even call friends. And after asking a few questions, silence, crickets, nothing. One set of folks literally ghosted us. And I talk a little bit about it in the book again. I'm going to keep hawking the book.
Yeah, keep doing it.
But I've only got so many stories, folks. Okay, so it is what it is. I'm just a young guy, but they literally had their annual gala, and we were invited to it, and we were part of it. Their goal for the gala was maybe a few dollars more than the check we would have written, and they didn't even raise it. They raised half of it. So then they're in like catastrophe mode because now they haven't even hit the budget they thought they were going to hit, and now they're asking people for more. And it's just eerie to sit back and say, hang on, okay, let's just process this. What's happening right now? We wanted to help, we wanted to be a part of it, but they didn't have the answers to the questions we were expecting to see. And so that caused a barrier for us, because we have to be good stewards too. I can't just write a check blindly and then say, okay, God, I did my bit. That's it. I can go party now. And I think people do that, especially successful people, but they're missing out on God's best for themselves. And it's not being a great steward, because sometimes the folks you're writing those checks to can't handle them. And the best example of this, I just read it in a book this weekend. We all heard of Alibaba, the Chinese, shopping site online. Jack Ma is I think the wealthiest guy in China, worth billions. So very early on in Alibaba's life, there was a gentleman by the name of Massa that had a conversation with Jack Ma. Massa is the guy who runs SoftBank. SoftBank's one of the largest venture capital firms in the world. They had $100 billion investment fund called a Vision Fund. They're one of the guys who invested into WeWork, the big co-working brand, billions and billions of dollars. And so Massa invested $20 million into Alibaba at a very early level. But here's what's interesting about the story, and I never knew. That 20 million that Massa invested, when he cashed out, he got $100 billion back from that $20 million investment. So that's how much Alibaba grew. He tried to give Jack Ma more money and he wouldn't take it. And he literally said to him, if you gave it to me, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I wouldn't know how to handle it wisely. And he only took the 20 million. And I wonder, as especially successful entrepreneurs, how many times has anybody ever said that to you when you try to give them money in the ministry kind of Christian circles? I've never heard it. We would take whatever somebody gives us, but that honesty of saying, you know what, maybe I can't handle that. Like maybe it's too much. And I think the reason for that is because, God made it clear. One guy was a 5-talent guy. One guy was a 2-talent guy. One guy was a 1-talent guy. There's no shame whichever one you are. Like God made you. If I'm a 2-talent guy, I'm okay with that. Like, I don't have the headache that the 5-talent guy has. But if the 5-talent guy is trying to write checks to the 1-talent guy or the 2-talent guy, why would you do that? You're the 5-talent guy. Like, go make it happen. You don't need to look to someone else. Yeah. And so ultimately, I think we abdicate our responsibility. And it's just so easy for us to give to the ministry, if we want to call it that, without realizing, no, dude, your life's the ministry. Like, you've got this backwards. You're literally taking money from the ministry to give it to someone else's when you're it. Like, tag, it's you all along. Let's go. Let's make it happen. So hopefully that answers the question.
Man, that's powerful. What I'm hearing you say is it's about you getting your hands dirty. It's about you being at the front end of, front line of where ministry is happening and taking ownership of that, because it's what you've been called to. And, I'll say one more thing and then I'll turn it over to Les. I wonder, as I'm hearing you talk earlier, I wonder how many pastors ended up in pastoral ministry because somewhere along the line they were told that if you want to serve God full time, this is how you do it. I think I meet a lot of pastors in that place that they're serving in the context of a church. They're frustrated with so much of what goes into this thing we've created called pastoring, and they're frustrated by it, and they really feel drawn to something in the marketplace, but there's this thing in the back of their mind going, yeah, but I want to serve God full time with my life. I'm sure you have a different outlook on that, but as someone who has been in that world, you've seen how the sausage is made, so to speak, in the church world. What would you say to that pastor that was told that, growing up, surrender to full-time Christian service, and what that means is be a missionary or a pastor? No one ever told him you could do that, running a corporation.
Yeah, so I devoted a full chapter to this, and it was a really tough one to write because I was that guy. Like this is the painful lesson I learned. I wasted decades chasing what I thought was what God wanted. I had a heart that said, I want to serve Jesus. And the only way that I knew how to do that, and the only way anybody around me knew how to do that, was where you should go to Bible college. You should go be a pastor. You should go work at a church. That was the worst advice on earth. And it was the best thing ever when I stopped trying to do that, because I was a square peg in a round hole. So if someone's feeling that way, quit. Like, stop. First of all, full-time ministry isn't working in a church. Again, you're talking about a building and an organization, but that's not the church. The church is the entire body. You want to serve the church and be pastoral, forget about the title pastor. If you believe God wants you to be pastoral, being a pastor is shepherding people. It's loving on people. I can love on people as a business leader. I can probably do it a little bit more because I got a few more people I have access to. And I definitely have some that I have their attention because I write them a paycheck every week. And so if that's your calling, go do it, but go do it on the field. Like go play ball. Why would you do anything else? And I think there's so many, I've seen so many, they walk through my doors and they look for office space. Oh, I used to be a youth pastor. I used to be a kids pastor. I used to be this. And it's like they're hanging their heads in shame. There is no shame. You should never have gone down that road in the first place. You got some really crappy advice from people who didn't understand what God was doing. When God made Adam and Eve, he didn't create a church service on a Sunday morning. He had community with them every day because he lived life with them and walked with them in the garden every single afternoon. Ministry is our daily life. It's this integration of life. It's not this separation. And we want to do our compartmentalization thing as Americans, right? We want our church on Sunday morning. We want our football on Sunday afternoon. We want our work on Monday through Friday, not even from 9 to 5 anymore, because who wants to work and go to the office? Like, we'll just play at work and be at home half the time. And, that's a whole different story. But God doesn't work compartmentally. Like being a follower of Jesus isn't compartmental. You wake up and you follow Jesus. You go to sleep and you follow Jesus. When your head hits the pillow, the last thing of the day, he's right there with you, just like when you wake up in the morning. And I don't think we're taught that as Christians in the West. I don't think we understand that very well. If we did, we wouldn't make the choices we make. You wouldn't have the epidemics that you have in Christian circles, whether it's the porn thing, whether it's the drinking thing, whether it's the abusive thing. I mean, statistically, one in so many people abuses another human being. If you're in a church with 500 people, that means there's people in that church that are in that start. Like, it is what it is. How does that happen? It's impossible. So it makes no sense until we start to realize we've got to change something. I need power.
Yeah, for sure. Mike, you said several things there that we could drill down on. I want to just ask you to speak to one of them, because this one, as you said it, it stung a bit. And so that's telling me that that's something that we probably need to look at a little closer. And then before we sign off in a few minutes, I do want you to talk about giving us an overview or kind of the main thing about your book, because it's a powerful message. And then I do want you to share with our listeners about where they can go and find more of this sort of content and just more truth that has to do with ministry in the marketplace. So here's what I heard you say, and I'm going to just accept the fact that it's the Spirit working through you, because it did feel like one of those things. You mentioned a minute ago about what I heard you say was there's a difference between stroking a check and getting your hands dirty. And don't you think that one of the issues is that people are ready to stroke a check or give a sum, but really not get their hands dirty? And one of the things about Jesus is, man, he got his hands dirty. The Apostle Paul got his hands dirty, and ministry can be very, very messy as well. And one of the things that's really unique about your model, and one of the reasons I really love it, is that you didn't create a nonprofit or a not-for-profit in order to justify spending money a certain way and hide it from the IRS. Right. It's legitimately the ministry arm of what you're doing in the marketplace. I think that's a great model. It's amazing that we don't see it more, but we just don't. But do you think that one of the reasons is that many people they'd like to stroke a check to one of those and let them do the ministry rather than get their hands dirty themselves?
Yeah. Again, I think there's multiple levels to this. I think the primary level is, you're absolutely right. It's easier to write a check. Now I've checked my box because I've given God his tax. I can go do what I want. Let's go buy another car. Let's go buy a bigger house. Doesn't make any difference because I gave God his 10%. It's why I hate the word tithe. I think there's some people who just don't understand. Like, nobody's taught them. Nobody's explained it. I think sometimes it's just sheer laziness for sure. But I think sometimes they just don't know. But I think what worries me and what really saddens me is you read a passage like Matthew 25 and the story of the sheep and the goats. Mm-hmm. And again, I pull on this thread, in a chapter because it's so powerful to me. You have got a group of people who stand there and say, but Jesus, we cast out demons in your name. We healed the sick in your name. And he says, yeah, but what was your name again? Like, I don't know yours. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm not healing anybody and I'm not casting out any demons. So there were folks who were, but they didn't know him and he didn't know them because they hadn't figured out what walking with Jesus really meant. And I think part of walking with Jesus is rolling up your sleeves and getting involved with other people. Like, that's the Christian life. And so until we start realizing that we've got to figure a way to bring this back into our day-to-day existence, do you want to be the guy that gets to heaven and says, but God, I wrote all these checks to you. And he says, okay, great. But what was your name again? Like, you're not in the book, dude. What are you going to do? It's crazy. And so I think some of it lies on the shoulders of the folks who are making bad decisions, but I think some of it lies on the shoulders of those of us that are leaders and don't want to tackle these conversations.
There you go.
And I think we were scared of tackling them because we might not get canceled, but they might not come back. You don't want to say something uncomfortable to someone because, especially as a church leader, I need you to come back next week. So I got to make you feel good.
I need that check too. We need the check to keep the thing running.
Right. Well, so how do you have a system like that? How do you have a system where the guy who's supposed to challenge and speak into your life is the guy who depends on you for existence? Like that's just crazy right there.
Yep. We have mentioned the message in the book a few times. So would you take a few minutes and just talk about that message and about the lives that I'm sure it's impacted lives already. I'm sure this book impacted your life, even as you were, putting what God placed on your heart down on paper. So who's the book really for? And then how can somebody go to either your website or someplace else, listen to your podcast? How can we find out more?
Yeah, so MikeThakur.com is just my name, Thakur. You'll find everything there, so you can connect on social. I don't do a whole lot of social, but you'll find me on there. The book's there, audio, ebook as well if you want it. But the book was written for, I think, people like you were talking about, folks who are in ministry thinking, I want to serve Jesus, but this just doesn't seem like it's working. Like, this just isn't making sense to me. And you're robbing the world of the gifts that God gave you, the ideas, the entrepreneurial heart. Like, you could be the next guy who, what if the Instagram guys had gone to be church, youth pastors instead? Like, we would literally not have a platform where billions of people connect because they thought they were doing the God thing. So, talk to Jesus and ask him, hey, like, is there something else I should be doing? And the book was written for folks like that. I wrote it for people like 13-year-old Mike, who had a heart for Jesus and thought, you know what, then I should go to Bible college. It's like, no, that's the worst thing you can do. Stop. You can do so much more. You can be so much more. There's so many different ways you can serve God. Not that serving God in a church setting is a negative thing, but again, it's a particular thing for a particular person, and God can't have a million coaches and no players. Like, we've got to have a balance on the team. And I think, finally, it was written for pastors. It was written for leaders to say, hey, listen, guys, like, we've had 2,000 years of this church thing, and like, the world's not looking so hot. Maybe we need to think different. Maybe we need to just start thinking about different ways that we can work together. Some pastors, because I see it, you're a successful business guy, dude. You're just a walking target with a bullseye on your back. Hey, I got a building project, man. I got to do this renovation. It's 75 grand we weren't expecting. Can you pray, brother, and see if God leads you? And it's like, dude, I'm not going to pray. I don't need to. I already know the answer. It's no. Like, I'm not being mean, but that's your problem. Like, it's not mine. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not writing checks to fix AC. I want to fix lives. Tell me how we can fix lives. And so I'm hoping that we can usher in, maybe just kick that conversation a little further in the right direction of, how does church and business function? How does ministry and business function, in the next decade, in the next couple of decades? What does that look like? How do we help church leaders and pastors not feel like they've got to carry the weight of everything on their shoulders? Because that's not fair to them either. They're not here to fix the world. We all are together, and we shouldn't be just pushing that all on someone else when we've got some responsibility to that. So, it's a team effort, and we've got to figure out how to be a team again.
Yeah, man, I love that. Hey, real quick before we wrap up, I've got two things that I want to run by you. One is, speak briefly to what are some of the causes that you're passionate about that your nonprofit is making a difference in. So the feeding the 5,000, what's that about, and what are some of the ways that you guys are impacting lives and making a difference there?
Yeah, so obviously we stole it from Jesus. He fed the 5,000, when he was speaking, and so for me that was a holistic feeding. He fed them spiritually first, and then he fed them physically. So for us, we take James at his word. Figured he was Jesus' kid brother. He probably knew a thing or two about what was important. Widows, orphans, children. We primarily work with children, women in difficult situations, so human trafficking, abusive situations, those kind of things. And then we look for the biggest impact towards life. So we don't only focus on situations that are necessarily faith situations. For example, we built a ton of water wells in the developing world that give clean water to, I don't know, a few thousand people maybe at this point or something like that. Do I care whether they find out about Jesus or not? Absolutely. Am I going to force them to hear about Jesus before they can get some water? Absolutely not. Like, go get the water. It's okay. God can figure the rest out. He's a big enough God. But the folks we partner with, they make sure they put up a big sign. It has the English alphabet on it. It actually has a Bible verse on it so that they can start to learn how to see and read English, while they're getting that water. And if they want to learn more, there's people in those villages that they can talk to. But, we built some children's homes out in India. That's important to us, but really we're more interested, not necessarily in building more children's homes, because there's issues that come alongside that. We're really more interested in how do we fix the problem so we never need to build a children's home. So again, trying to get to that root cause and looking at it more from an entrepreneurial mindset than just, I'll help these kids today and I've done my bit. Everything's okay.
Yeah.
No, it's not okay, because I got to help the kids tomorrow. So let's just fix the root and not just band-aid the problem,
You're going upstream of the issue and finding out why people are falling in the stream to begin with. So, man, I love that. So my only last thing before we wrap up, you said a minute ago that you don't do much on social, and I'm just going to take you to task on that, because when I'm scrolling,
I knew that was coming.
you keep popping up, man, and you're talking. Mike, I thought I liked you a lot. I thought I had this deep respect for you, and then you're always plugging some Samsung thing. What are you doing on TikTok talking about Samsung? What's that about?
So I have a YouTube channel. I do tech reviews on YouTube. It just started off as a bit of a hobby, and it's funny, but that's actually been the most successful thing I've done in the last couple of years. And so it's starting to do okay. And so sometimes we'll drop some shorts on TikTok, and that's about as far as my social goes. I think we tried Insta, but that didn't really do too well. So it's primarily a YouTube channel. But yes, you want to learn about tech and stuff. I've been around it for years. I used to sell it, obviously. We sold IT, many years ago. So it was just an easy thing for me to do. And it stops my wife having to listen to me talking about all the latest gadgets and stuff. So, someone else can listen.
Well, that's fun. I mean, in the body of Christ, we can agree to disagree on things. I'm going to keep my Mac stuff going over here, and you have fun with all that Samsung.
Listen, if you want to miss out, that's your choice, dude. That's the beauty of free will.
All right, Mike, it's been a pleasure, man. We're honored that you came on and shared your time and your life with us. And I know this is going to add value to our audience. So thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah, cool beans. No, thanks, you guys.
Mike.
I appreciate it. Keep up the great work.
Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the Entre Pastors Podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the Entre Pastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our Entre Pastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own Entre Pastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at entrepastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.